You're now live.
We are now live. We had hoped to maybe vote this bill out today, but I have another group that wants to talk to us, something about equity. So we have Michael O'Grady. This is S-188, regulated license, small cannabis cultivation as farming. And it came to us from Ag and Senator Pearson. I think you're the reporter on this. You want to just tell us why we got it?
Yeah, there are some minor tax implications. Committee will remember that when we passed S-54, there were some questions about land use and in particular current use for somebody that was going to be a small grower. And basically this updates that, trying to thread the needle between what we consider farming and where, if ever, there's cannabis fits into there. But you can't just straightforward do that if you wanted to, which the Senate has actually tried to do, because our agency of ag intersects with a lot of federal programs and federal inspection money and et cetera, et cetera. So this is sort of saying, hey, for small cannabis outdoor growers, we're going to consider them farming, but we have to sort of set that up in a special way. But included in there, as committee knows, are certain sales tax exemptions for farm equipment, et cetera. So I think that's why it landed here. Okay. It's actually quite a modest bill and reflects recommendations from the Cannabis Control Board and others as they've moved from sort of theory to what we're about to put forward as reality.
Okay, Mr. O'Grady, welcome. We don't see you too often.
No, I think this is the first time I've been in
this
session. Yeah. So just to follow up on Senator Pearson framing of the bill, in Act 164, which legalized the cultivation of cannabis, it specifically provided that the cultivation of cannabis is not farming. So it does not receive the sales tax benefits, the land use benefits, the environmental benefits, motor vehicle benefits, etc. However, there was a provision in Act 164 that provided small cultivators who already qualified for use value could cultivate on their land without jeopardizing the use value characterization or use value enrollment of the parcel used for cultivation. It's 1,000 square feet, and there was the discussion, should 1,000 square feet disqualify an entire farm or entire parcel from use value? And so you included a provision, the General Assembly included a provision that said that small cultivator that previously qualified for use value can continue to qualify for use value. However, there has been discussion among interested parties about whether or not small cultivators should be considered farming as a whole and receive all the benefits of farming. Well, as Senator Pearson just referenced, the Agency of Agriculture has concerns about that. There are federal programs such as NRCS EQIP, specific federal programs that fund the agency directly, such as the Equal To Status program for slaughter, where the agency is concerned about losing eligibility for those programs because those programs generally all have what's called the drug-free workplace requirement under federal law that requires a workplace to be free of the cultivation, production, sale, distribution, etc., of substances that are prohibited under the Controlled Substances Act, and cannabis is under Schedule 1 of that act. So the agency was anxious about taking on small cultivators as farming. But the agency, the Committee on Agriculture, wanted to give those small cultivators some of the benefits of farming. And the benefits that the small cultivators were most specifically seeking were to be exempt from municipal regulation, zoning regulation, as farming is, to be exempt from Act 250 as farming is, to still maintain that ability to enroll and use value as you authorized under Act 164, and to provide the small cultivators the benefit of 3 sales tax exemptions. And so that is basically why I believe I am here, because I drafted that portion of the bill, or the amendment, I should say, and it's in section 2, and it goes on. The specific language you want to look at is on page 4 of section 2, subsection F, which it says, notwithstanding that proviso that cultivation of cannabis is not farming, a small cultivator who initiates cultivation outdoors, so it has to be outdoor, on a parcel of land that was subject to the RAPs, so it already had to have been farming, because that's what land subject to the RAPs is, prior to licensed cultivation. So it's outdoor cultivation on land that was already subject to the RAPs, already farming. It shall be regulated in the same manner as farming is, and not as development under Act 250. That's the first subdivision, F1. It shall not be regulated by municipal bylaw in the same manner that required agricultural practices are not regulated by municipal bylaw. That's subdivision 2. It shall be eligible to enroll in the use value appraisal program for the cultivation of cannabis, provided that the agricultural land or farm building on the parcel where cannabis cultivation occurs was enrolled in the use value appraisal program prior to commencement of licensed cannabis cultivation, and the parcel continues to qualify for enrollment. It's very similar to what you did in Act 164 with some slight, just kind of minor revisions. And then last, it shall be exempt under 32 VSA 97413, 974-125, and 974-150. 3 is agricultural feed, seeds, plants, baler twine, etc. 25 is agricultural equipment, and 50 is compost, fertilizer, and manure. So that is what would be provided. They would not receive the same benefits, all of the same benefits as farming. They wouldn't be exempt from electrical work in a barn that doesn't have residents in it. They would not be exempt from the motor vehicle requirements. They would not be exempt from environmental requirements for stormwater, or groundwater, or all the other benefits that are afforded to farming. It would only be exempt from Act 250, exempt from municipal bylaws, eligible to enroll and use value as they were under Act 164, and then exempt from 3 sales tax provisions.
Okay, so they had to be in farming before this.
Correct.
So we're not picking up a whole bunch of new customers that would impact the ed fund. And
that's my understanding. I know Graham was looking at it. I don't know if he actually came up with a fiscal note or not.
okay, well, we will ask Graham when we take this up. We're taking it up again. We're having, I think, later this week, and we'll see if Graham can give us a fiscal note. And it limits the size, right?
The definition of small cultivator is embedded in the program. It's I can read you the definition if you would like.
Is it in this bill? Or you just tell me what it is?
It means a cultivator with a plant canopy or space for cultivating plants for breeding stock of not more than 1,000 square feet.
Okay, so it's 1,000 square feet. All right. Committee questions. Senator Pearson.
So let me just say, because I know the committee's antenna goes up when you see a bill that Senator Starr's worked on and tax exemptions. We're basically trying to say, if you're a farm and you want to diversify in this manner, how do we make that possible and not complicated? And so, for instance, the sales tax exemption was not a big priority for me at all, I'll be honest. But it gets really complicated to try to tell a farm, 1,000 square feet is tiny. And so to try to say, well, they've got to go in and be paying tax on this chainsaw, but not this, just gets ridiculous. So that was our conclusion, was to just sort of say, no, this level. And frankly, we had a long debate about why we would only apply these rules to small growers, the very smallest growers, and not bigger. Hemp farmers are farming, just like no matter what size their plot is.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, this was a tiptoeing in that direction, but I wanted you to understand that it was not really a desire to give people that particular tax benefit, but became kind of unworkable as we thought it through.
There were what was it? Log skidders that were used to remove manure from, that got very complicated. And then there was bark mulch and whether it was being used in agriculture. It's bad. It's just bad tax policy. So this just says you get a sales tax exemption. I mean, how do you buy a tractor and say it's only being,
Right. I mean, they get it today. That was the other principle, was this is not new people.
Yeah.
You don't want somebody coming in, buying an old field that's, been out of production for a long time and then suddenly demanding all of the sort of exemption from all manner of things. And we certainly didn't want it to be for indoor. You don't want the prospect of a warehouse being built in the middle of a farm field and trying to say there's no Act 250. We're way away from all of that, just trying to, in a modest way.
Well, okay, Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, though, it's not based on the person and what the person was doing previously. It's based on the land and what the land was being used for previously, right? Because
that's correct. It's both for actually for all of them. It's about the land. If the land was subject to the RAPs.
Okay, that's what I thought. So that's why I was getting confused by the new people, because it could be new people. It's just not new land.
Right.
But that would also mean if it's not new land, then it shouldn't have an impact on current use, because it actually says that it has to have previously been in current use. Is that correct, Michael?
That's why I drafted it the way I drafted it under Act 164 and under this, so that it will have a minimal effect on use value.
Right, because it's not new land. Okay.
Right.
Just wanted to make sure I was understanding it correctly. Thank you.
And for the sales
current use, right?
Right. Pardon me?
It's presently in current use.
Yes.
So you can sell land. You do have a process for I don't know if you have to unenroll and re-enroll, but there is a process for.
You can transfer land. It's just that the lien travels with the land.
So so if you couldn't have the thing lying fallow for 10 years and come in and say, well, this was current use 10 years ago and we're going to buy it. And but who'd do that? You got to buy over 30 acres to put 1,000 square feet in farming.
Well, you can qualify for farming on less than 30 acres, but you have to generate income on
That's
that
right.
land. And
50%.
so if you left it fallow for 10 years and less than 30 acres, you would not, you would trigger what's called the land use change tax penalty / development and be removed.
Some of our favorite things. Okay.
I do want to note that there is a typo in the language. I forgot a 1 under the sales tax provision where it says be exempt from the retail sales imposed under 32 VSA 977. It should say 9771.
I'm sure we all noticed that, and we will consider it a Scrivener error. Please add the 1.
So I will talk to the Senate Secretary if he will change that as a Scrivener error, or if he would
Yep.
like an amendment.
Okay, yeah, if we have any amendments, we can do it that way if there's another draft. Okay, so we have, I forget who is coming in, who has a very tight time frame this week. And that we will,
Madam Chair,
yes, Senator Bray.
I just wanted to check. So I think Senator Starr well, let me stick to the use value piece and land that is farming. We were just talking about if it's fallow for 10 years or something, but is there any, just trying to remember how we ensure that it's actively farming, how often? Isn't there an annual self-certification? So basically that we wouldn't end up having basically not a working farm claiming farm status. You'd have to have been certified prior years.
That's correct. Annually, a farm or a landowner that wants to enroll as agricultural land and is enrolled has to recertify that they qualify as agricultural land.
Okay, thank
And
you.
that I could go through the definition of agricultural land, but I don't want you all to go to sleep. So
Yeah, I think we're okay. All right, other questions? Not seeing any, so thank you, Michael.
you're welcome.
As soon as we hear all the witnesses, unless something unexpected turns up, I'm hoping to pass this out this week. So we will see.
Okay. Good to see you all.
Good to
See
see
you in the
you.
building sometime soon.
Yeah, 2 more
All
weeks.
right. Okay. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Um,
All right.
So I think Senator Starr forgot his note to say if we're doing anything with Act 250, he was going to let the Natural Resources Committee know, but
Well, this is an Act 250, I don't think. Is it?
Well,
Oh, yeah, it is. You're exempt. I had my composter that
yeah,
said he was an agricultural business.
one of the most popular things going this year is, provision 1 to be not treated as development under 10 VSA Chapter 151, which is Act 250. So it's a very popular exemption.
yeah, I mean, the land is currently,
Right. It's
you
no
know,
change. Right.
Yeah,
It's no
no
change
change.
and trying to make that clear.
Yeah.
And
No,
to be fair, it only kind of gets called out in this draft. We had the original language just said shall be considered farming, and then the benefit is implicit.
right.
But that's where the agency was like, this creates a lot of problems for us. So it was one of those where the language sort of catches your eye now, but the sentiment didn't include the language the whole way through, and again, it's not a change.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
it's outdoor cultivation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not like if someone built a greenhouse and then it was lit up like a torch all night, that would be very different than for a neighbor than if you're just growing yet another crop. And 1,000 square feet is peanuts. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. The next one we have on is, 277 is civil service retirement system income. We don't have any witnesses. We just didn't get a chance to talk about that. So any thoughts, Senator Pearson?
Yeah, Madam Chair, you'd asked me to look at this a little bit. I think I'll just say where I've learned, we all I guess for me, immediately I thought, oh, these people, we should treat them the way we treat Social Security. That's fair. Then Graham came in and explained, well, this retirement benefit is sort of Social Security plus a pension. It's taking place of those things. So if you just forgive the whole thing, you're not being fair at all. You're giving them quite a sweetheart deal. So I thought I heard and volunteered or was directed or volunteered, depending on how you look at it, by the chair to try to figure this out and try to figure out how do we take their pension, back out some portion of it that we would say is equivalent to Social Security, and then give that the same treatment that we do Social Security recipients. It's a little bit complicated because all of this stuff is more complicated than that. But Graham thinks he has some justifiable way of doing that and is going to come to us with, and I asked him once I understood it, and he and I sorted out a few presumptions. He's going to work with Abby on it. The short story is you would exempt about $7,000 or $8,000, some fixed amount for these people if they're hitting those same income limits that we applied for Social Security beneficiaries. There is some trick. That's not a perfect solution because, and Graham can explain this better, but the federal tax already has some exemption for Social Security, and so that flows through as we receive AGI, but that is a fixed dollar amount. And so as Social Security benefits climb with a COLA, that benefit becomes a little less, the federal benefit becomes less generous, and in fact that puts pressure on the state benefit. All of that is confusing. One way to think of it is Social Security is not a static tax benefit as we've created it, but it's very hard to create a fluid tax benefit for these civil workers. And so what Graham and I decided to present, it's not a decision other than that, is a fixed, based on kind of what does it mean today to Social Security beneficiaries. And so whenever we have time, I think you'll see that. And it's actually quite modest. It's equivalent to about $180, $190 for somebody that fits into this window, an individual filer with a civil servant pension. Costs $180. The whole universe costs us maybe $200,000 or $300,000. So I don't think it's a heavy lift. It's not perfect equity, but it's moving in the right direction. But as soon as you answer that question, Graham, as he does, points out, well, what about a retired teacher from Maine who lives here and is not collecting Social Security? There are other people in that universe.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to get your hands around it. Probably not a big universe of people, but it's more than $200,000 or $300,000 worth. So I sort of said, well, why don't you and Abby try to think about both of those, and maybe we combine them, maybe we don't. But it's more complicated than that. I think we can get a crude equivalency if that's in our interest, and that's what we decide to do. And at the end of the day, for the general fund and for these families, it's actually not a huge deal one way or another, but I think maybe we could argue we should do it anyway.
Yeah. I know the state of Massachusetts had a bunch. It might even be the city of Boston, if not the entire state employees. And they just might retire here. So, and I just remembered something I was supposed to tell you at the beginning. Trying to schedule and predict what the floor is going to look like a week in advance is a little difficult. So we are not scheduled for witnesses until 2 tomorrow. But it looks like we may well be off the floor by 1:30. And, trying to get witnesses on short notice. So I thought we had put off S-161, I think, Rygate, because we hadn't met. I know I'd asked Senator Pearson to see if he could contact you, but think about Rygate. Crossover is coming. And we're going to have to reach a decision up, down, or up with conditions or amendments, but think about that, because we can't put it off much longer. So Senator Hardy, and then.
Okay, I can hold off. I have questions about all the stuff that Chris just said, or Senator Pearson just said, but maybe it may be more questions for Graham and Abby than what Senator Pearson can answer. So I can wait until we
Okay,
have.
yeah, we will get that on the agenda. I'm trying to be very cognizant of the request we got from Joint Fiscal, which was be careful with their time. They are really backed up over there. And it's happened before, but this year we happened to have we had some retirements, and we've got a whole bunch of new staff, and it just takes a little longer to get things going. I'm also trying to find some witnesses for the education income tax. I've just got to get in through Joint Fiscal and get some suggestions there so that we make sure everybody gets heard. With that, we're going to go on to S53.
Madam Chair, just real
Yes.
quick on Rygate.
Yeah.
I talked to Dylan the other day, and one of the things I asked him to do for us was to connect with Greg Faber
Yeah.
at the PUC. The committee will recall that Faber was sort of, I don't know how to characterize it, but he didn't say, yeah, this is no problem. He said, oh, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
So
yeah.
I said to Dylan, like, I'm not convinced that the PUC, that it's very complicated. I think this is pretty straightforward for their wheelhouse, but my assertion was it would help us if they were at least able to deal with the construct that is kind of under consideration. So I know they are connecting. And so it's my hope that at least one of those strange dynamics here gets handled. And I just wanted to update people with that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, when I put this on hold, I suggested that the representatives of the owners do some background work, because we were spinning our wheels. So, to just get some individual answers and work with the other interested parties. So if it doesn't go, it doesn't. Okay, so we are going on to sections 14 and 15. This is in the feminine hygiene product bill again, which is the military retirement income tax exemption. And Senator Brock, you're on the agenda, so the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think I've spoken to this committee before when we were looking at this last year, and so I don't want to go on at length. But we have a number of folks today who are going to be talking about this tax exemption of income taxes for military retirees. We've got some folks from the administration sharing that perspective. We have either one or two. I know we had some difficulty getting one of our attendees connected today, although he indicated that he would be here. These are folks who are recent retirees, particularly from the Vermont Army National Guard, who can talk a little bit about the impact of this of military retirement taxation on them and on their fellow officers and enlisted people from just the Vermont National Guard alone. And then we have another gentleman who's going to talk generally about some of the business aspects of this. We heard from someone representing the Vermont Chamber of Commerce, and I know that there are other business organizations that are interested in this. To me, this really represents several things. The first is an economic development issue, because we are, as everybody on this committee knows, we're desperately short of workers. We really need people in a variety of skilled areas, and we've had great difficulty attracting them. The military retiree, the average age of a military retiree is in their 30s to mid 40s. These are people who have 20 years of work available to them. And many of the people retiring, there's something like just leaving the military alone, not even counting retirees, there's some 200,000 people per year who move out into the civilian workforce. And particularly retirees are well suited because there's a degree of maturity, there is some degree of income. Generally people, and we've got some statistics to support this, are people who have families. And so it's not just the income of the retiree that might come to Vermont, it is the income of the spouse and also the addition of children who can go into these vacant seats that we have in our school system. Even if they retire here and don't necessarily take a job, and that might be the older retiree, and it's not the majority of people, there are people who are adding to our community and who are spending money. And there are people who have some money to spend depending upon the rank at which they retire. And that is obviously going to be beneficial for our communities. We saw a study that JFO did a year or so ago, and I have some concerns about the JFO study. And I've had conversations with Catherine and with Graham about it, because the study did not include a lot of things that I think are really important, including the effect of the spousal benefit. JFO also does not do dynamic studies, and there are materials out that do dynamic studies that show in other states what the effect has been of making this change in terms of adding both income and economic value over the years after the change is made compared to what was going on beforehand. In your attachments, there are several documents that are designed to provide some of that background information, and hopefully they're well researched and documented. And so I would ask if you have a moment, and I know we never have a moment here in this setting, but if you could just glance at some of that, and I think it will answer a lot of questions that I don't want to spend a lot of time talking or lecturing about today. I think that the economic development angle is one, the addition to adding people to Vermont who will add to our economy is another. And then I think the last one is it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do, if nothing else, to recognize the people who've spent their lives protecting this country, often in the worst places of the world and away from their families for long periods of time. There's some argument I know that said that, well, if you give it to the military, then the first responders are going to line up and they're going to want it too. But that's not the evidence. And included in the documents that I've given you is a study or a research review, quick review done by NCSL that looked at those 9 states that added a military retirement benefit within the last 10 years. Have they gotten, in effect, an increase in other kinds of retirement benefit legislation resulting from it? And that hasn't happened. One state where there was an addition of a kind of civil service retirement was in Maryland, but in all of the other 8 states, none of that happened. And so I don't think that is an issue. Vermont is an outlier in this. 47 of the other states have some form of military retirement income tax exemption. And Vermont, along with California and Virginia, and also the District of Columbia, are the only ones at this point who don't. It places us in a bad position competitively to try to attract people who have the critical skill sets in medical, in the trades, in CDL drivers, and a number of other critical specialties that we need and are desperately trying to fill. And so I'd ask if you would take a look at the material that's attached on our webpage at this point, as well as listen to the witnesses. And I hope you'll be swayed that this is something that we should really consider doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. First on the agenda is Secretary Curley. There she is. Welcome, Madam Secretary, and the floor is yours.
Hi, can I make a recommendation that we let Commissioner Bolio go first, because I think he might be able to set the table a little better for my remarks. Is that
That's
okay?
fine. Yes. So
Perfect.
Commissioner Bolio.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary Curley. I have a document that I sent Faith very late, and so I apologize for that. Folks may not have had an opportunity to see it yet. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen here and walk through it.
It has been posted, or at least
Faith is always so quick on that, so I had no doubt about
something
that.
from you has been posted.
Let's see here. I am hopeful folks will be seeing it now. And do I have a presentation up?
Says military retirement pay. Yes, you do.
Perfect. All right, thank you. So I'm Craig Bolio, I'm the tax commissioner. This is an issue that's been close to the governor's heart for a number of years now. As you just heard from Senator Brock, currently Vermont is one of only 3 states that fully tax military retirement pay. There are a number of states that fully exempted or have no income tax that you see on the screen, and then a number of states as well that have partial exemptions. Some do that straight through an exemption for military retirement pay itself or a broader retirement exemption, but it leaves Vermont on a pretty small island of only 3 states, Vermont, California, and Virginia, as well as DC, that tax it fully. Some of the things that you just heard are what the governor feels strongly about as well, right? The JFO issue brief from last year cited national data that said 70% of military retirees retire between the ages of 35 and 50, which means they're primed to enter the civilian workforce and help enhance our workforce shortage, or help address our workforce shortage. And they bring other benefits, right? They bring small business loans, VA home loans, GI Bill benefits. So there's a number of different ways that they contribute to the community. And we believe that exempting this retirement pay will make Vermont more attractive for that audience. I have only 4 slides today, 3 additional ones that are trying to address some of the questions that I've heard from this committee in this session, as well as I think maybe some of them last year. But the first is I've heard concerns that other professions will come forward and ask for the same treatment on their pensions. And from my chair, it is not necessarily a debate about which service is more deserving, though I do think there's a case to be made that part of the reason to exempt military retirement pay is a celebration of that service to the country. But the debate over whose pensions to exempt and who's not is not a debate about who is more deserving of that treatment. There is federal law that is backed up by a Supreme Court decision that prohibits states from exempting state pensions without exempting federal pensions. And it was in Davis v. Michigan, a case from 1989. It was an 8-1 decision that essentially held that that states could not tax federal retirement benefits if they exempted their own state retirement benefits from tax. So Vermont is really limited in the state pensions that it can exempt without having to also exempt federal pensions. Military pensions are, for lack of a better word, exempt from that problem because they are federal pensions. So that they do not fall into that anti-discrimination law that the feds have cited for this. Other states that have some state pensions exempted, for instance, I believe New York exempts teacher retirement. They have exempted all federal pensions. I don't know what the price tag on that is, but I believe it's significant. So it's a much wider discussion to exempt those state pensions than what we're talking about today, and exempting military pensions, which has a much more modest price tag associated with it. Another question that I've heard is the break even and wondering when it breaks even. So Tax and JFO have a consensus estimate that it would be annual foregone general fund revenue of 3.25 million annually. And the JFO issue brief last year cited that 640 new military retirees would have to move to the state for it to break even. That was under last year's number, which I think was 2.8 million or 2.9 million, so maybe a little bit different now. But one thing that I do want to point out is that analysis used individual data with an average of 48,000 household income. That was the analysis that had been done by ACCD that came up with those numbers. That same analysis shows that if there's a family with 150,000 of income coming into the state, they would bring in 16,750 in taxes. The individual that was used for the basis, or the average individual that was used for the basis of this analysis, was bringing in, I believe, 4,500 in taxes. So if you had all families at the 150,000 income threshold, it would take 194 families. Now, I'm not here saying that that's everybody who's coming in, right? But a portion of these folks have working spouses as well, for sure. And I do believe that the JFO issue brief had also cited that the average or the median military household income was in the mid 50s. So I do believe that we could assume that they would bring in a bit more tax revenue than the original analysis had shown. So I'm guessing the true number of how many people we need is somewhere in the middle of the 194 and 640. Just for reference, if the number is 640, that's only a 16% increase from where we are today, which feels distinctly achievable. And so for my chair leaves. Oh,
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, maybe we ask, do you want to hold questions till the end, or?
That's up to Commissioner Bolio. I just can't see you, Deb, with your hands raised.
I'm happy to take one now if you'd like, Senator Bray.
Sure, thanks very much. Can you say a little bit about the 640 new military retirees moved to the state to break even, but we must have a loss rate of military retirees, right? Because of the lack of a benefit. Is that not, that people who might stay after retirement decide to leave because of the lack of a benefit? So I'm just trying to figure out the slowing the outflow versus bringing new people in. Did you have a way of looking at that?
It's notoriously difficult to prove that, but I think conceptually what you're referencing, Senator, is correct, right? That somebody who would otherwise have stayed here is the same fiscal impact as to somebody who comes here because of that, right? So I think, so maybe what I should have said is that you need 640 who otherwise would have left or who come here. Yeah. I don't have a way of quantifying that now, but I can say Department of Defense data shows that for the last 5 or 6 years, the population of military retirees in the state is virtually stagnant, right? Despite having additional Vermont service members retiring. The figure that I don't have in there is the rate of passing from these military retirees. Right. So I don't know exactly how it shakes out, but I do think that there's a case to be made to say, we're seeing a population not move at all over the last several years, despite additional Vermont service members retiring.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sure.
What, Commissioner
Pearson?
Thank you. Yeah. It costs us $3.25 million annually, and then so we'd need all 640 to move in that first year, right? Otherwise, we're working off a deficit in the out years. Is that I'm not trying to argue that. I'm just trying to make sure I understand your data.
Yeah, if you need to break even in the first year, you'd need 640. Otherwise, if you got 100 each year, you're breaking even after 6-7 years, and then if you get more than that, eventually you're going to start seeing an increase from that.
I think that's optimistic at how fast you'd catch up, but okay, thanks.
I don't have sort of the dynamic modeling that's been done on this. I know there are a number of states who have done that find the break even is usually somewhere between 4 and 7 years. I can try to find some of that research. I don't have it with me today. And I don't believe JFO has done that kind of analysis either.
I believe we had this discussion on why corporations may decide to move or not move. And I think the conclusion was it's more complicated than that on any one thing. So we can look at stats, but it's really hard to pin it down to any one thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to add that that's correct, that you need more than a static analysis. And the JFO analysis is a static analysis. And they admit that in doing this kind of analysis, that's about all they can do in the time that's allotted. But there are a number of states that have done dynamic analysis that shows the return on investment. And some of those are cited in the materials that are on the website that I've attached. There are data from several states that have done both that kind of analysis and measurement that have shown what the return on investment payback is.
Okay. It would also be interesting to see how many major military bases there are in those states. Because, you know, if you're there and you retire and you've got kids that are in school there, that's going to play a role in how quickly or if you move.
But Madam Chair, one of the things that some of these analyses that again are attached are showing is that once you make the change to exempting military retirement pay, the number of retirees has risen, and that can be measured.
That's really okay.
I think that actually feeds into my last slide. Well, so I'll move to that. Because, you know, that sort of the last question from my chair is, does it impact decision making, right? And you're correct, Madam Chair. It's notoriously difficult, and I think Senator Bray, this is also what you were alluding to. It is notoriously difficult to prove that counterfactual and that but for, right, and holding all other things constant. So, you know, nobody has a crystal ball and can say with absolute certainty what will happen, but these are a couple of examples from states who have enacted this change in the last decade or so. So in the first case, we looked at Iowa, and they had enacted the military retirement exemption in 2014, active for tax year 2014. And I put the 2 years prior to that and the 2 years, the enacting year and the year after that. So sort of a 2 year before and 2 year after. I think the further you get before or the further you get after, it's hard to account for all of those other factors that go into it that you alluded to, Madam Chair. So I really tried to focus on the 2 years before and after. But in Iowa, you can see that the number nearly doubled, right, in the year that it was enacted, and then held some of that steam as well in the year after. Arkansas, another interesting case in that they have been losing military retirees and had been for some time. And when they enacted this, they still saw that they were having an outflow of them, but it had significantly curtailed from where it had been. So I think to your point, Senator Bray, you know, keeping an additional retiree here who would otherwise have left arguably has the same fiscal impact. So, you know, again, I think, does it make an impact? I think that the best data that we can show is yes, it does make an impact. And that it can help feed into folks who are of still prime working age, perhaps making a decision to live out the rest of their career and lives in Vermont. That was the end of my presentation, Madam Chair, so I'll take it down. I'm happy to take any additional questions before handing it to Secretary Curry.
No, Senator Bray, that's my cursor, not yours. Senator McDonald. Senator McDonald, you're muted.
Madam Chair, I'm still trying to get my head around this morning's committee meeting where we were discussing changes in Act 250 because of our lack of affordable housing. And one of the most discouraging things about this morning's meeting was that the lack of affordable housing is becoming worse rather than better. And all the proposals we have to spend money to build more homes for working Vermonters will only slow down the problems that we have now. And the notion of adding 640 new required domiciles for the prospective numbers is going to cause havoc once again with the available housing that we Vermonters have to buy. As they get outbid by people who arrive or just come up and purchase homes for the summertime. None of these discussions are held in a vacuum. We, on one hand, are trying to build more houses, and on the other hand, we're trying to fill them faster than we build them. And the net result of those conflicting policies isn't pretty. So that's my long one. And my real short one is I wish we would quit talking about celebrating the service of veterans unless we actually wish to celebrate the service of all veterans. So thank you.
Okay. So any other questions, Senator Hardy?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Commissioner. I'm just curious, your analysis and the numbers in particular, is that based on the original bill that was a full exemption, or is it based on the provisions in what is now S53, which is the first $10,000?
Yeah, so I thank you for asking that question. So I have an opportunity to clarify everything that I spoke about today, though I think it probably mostly impacts the general fund foregone revenue estimate is for what the governor had in his proposed budget, which is a full exemption for military retirement pay as well as survivors benefits. I believe that the revenue estimate for S53 at the 10,000 is like in the 930,000 range. But yeah, as I've been speaking today, I've been speaking about the full exemption. Thank you for that opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Secretary Curley.
Great, thank you so much. For the record, I'm Lindsay Curley. I'm the Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity for me to join you today to talk about the proposed exemption on the military pension tax. I'm going to speak to it from the lens of the recruitment efforts. There's not a week that goes by where I don't have a conversation with an employer or a member organization where folks aren't telling me, how dire the situation is in terms of trying to hire people. Employers are struggling to grow and expand their operations, but more importantly, right now, they are unable to meet their current operational demands due to excessive job vacancies. So this really, leads me to talk a bit about our strategies focused around recruitment and retention in our workforce and how we're collectively doing everything we can to bring individuals and their families here, but also to maintain the workforce that we have here currently. I want to point out that this is not only a retention tool for us, but a tool in our toolbox to attract a highly skilled and dedicated workforce and their families as well. We've deployed a variety of programs intended to help Vermonters build their jobs, find jobs or find better jobs. And we've used a variety of tools to attract new workers to our state. And what we've realized is there's no one silver bullet. It's a collective of tools in our toolbox that we really have to use all of them. You've heard in previous testimony today that approximately 200,000 women and men separate from U.S. military service each year and return to life as civilians. And they have a really important decision to make as they approach that separation date and they plan for transitioning to civilian life. Where can they find good jobs in affordable and safe communities? And I would argue Vermont is a really attractive place to live and work, but we do lack that tax policy needed to compete with our neighboring states on this front. So as you do deliberate this, I hope you will also take testimony from the Department of Labor in their Workforce Development Division in partnership with the Vermont National Guard. They've initiated targeted recruitment efforts at Fort Drum in Northern New York. And they do this by actively working with the exiting service members and new veterans who are in the height of their career and are able to offer Vermont employers some of the best work ethic, work product, skills for the in-demand jobs that we're so desperately trying to fill. And they bring experience that we also are desperate for. And they know, these folks that are working with these separating military members know that the military pension and survivors benefit tax exemption is an important tool that's missing from Vermont, and it would no doubt help us recruit critically needed talent to our state. In Fort Drum alone, we have learned that about a third of the people that are exiting service go back to what they would call their original home state. A third tend to stay in the area, and maybe to the point that the senator made earlier with respect to maybe kids that are already in school and established. And then there's a third of those who really can pick anywhere. So if you're looking at 200,000 that are separating, around the country each year, is it crazy to think that we might be able to get, 1% of the 66,000 that makes up a third of those that are just looking for a new place to go? So we would really love to have this tool in the toolbox, and we, as I mentioned before, we know that people have choices, and these things matter. And so anyway, that's, my support for broadening or for adopting this and broadening our ability to recruit people to Vermont. I just wanted to end by saying, if there was an interest by the committee from the committee to talk to employers around our state who can maybe explain how the civilian military workforce has been so impactful in a good way to their companies, and again, fill some high skilled jobs that have traditionally been really hard to fill. So I'm happy to do that if that's of interest. But at this point, I'm happy to take questions if there's any about recruitment.
Committee, I'll ask one.
Okay.
If you go anywhere south of Virginia or probably west of New York, and you come to buy a house in New England, you go into sticker shock. Our housing is very expensive and it's lacking. I've sold housing for 14 years, and I've been asked, where are the new houses? These are people that are moving here. Are we doing anything in your toolbox to overcome some of those other barriers?
Absolutely. If you look at, the entire budget proposed by the governor, in addition to workforce, housing is at the top. I'd say the top of the three-legged stool. There's a few other things in there as well, but yes, to your point, we are trying desperately to get some programs in place where we can refurbish some of the rundown housing stock and bring that back online. Also, trying to enable development where we want the development, encouraging zoning law changes where they make sense. So, we could do a deep dive on housing, but to your point, we absolutely need to be focused on that as well. But what I hope I want to caution people is to not tap the brakes on bringing people in because of our housing challenges, because I think that we have to keep both of them going. And it's important to, again, collectively have a variety of different things that we're working on all at once. And I don't think it's too much to expect that we can work on both things at once, or, 5 things at once, so to speak. So yes, Senator Cummings, I know you have sold homes for years, and I see the prices all around me going up. And I think what you're seeing is, this desire to bring rundown housing stock online. And also maybe people are, for so long, we all needed a really big space for just a few people. And I think you're seeing people partner up and join in sharing some housing. And that may have to happen for a while. But where there's a will, there's a way. So I don't know if I answered your question specifically, but the housing is definitely critical need and at the top of our minds.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Commissioner Secretary Curley? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I am going to go on to Lieutenant Colonel Dave Fabric. All right, I'm gonna
Oh,
master
close,
it.
close enough. Last name is Fabricius. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? Welcome to
Good, and-
Senate Finance. So,
And I appreciate the ability to speak to you all. I'll try to be brief. General Knight actually reached out to me as well as Mr. Brock in regards to testifying today.
before
don't-
you start, we just
Sure.
need you to introduce yourself for the record, so we have a name to go with the voice on the tape.
Absolutely. My name's Lieutenant Colonel Dave Fabricius. I'm currently a full-time member of the Vermont Army National Guard. I am the Chief of Plans, Operations, and Training at Camp Ethan Allen up in Jericho, Vermont. So the reason I was asked to speak is I am planning on retiring about this time next year. My plans as of right now, based off of finances, is to leave the state of Vermont. I can't afford to live here on a fixed income with my military retirement and my wife's teacher's retirement. I was a teacher prior to going back active duty into the military. I will retire with 20 years of active duty service, retiring as a lieutenant colonel. Even with that lieutenant colonel stipend, retirement stipend, and my wife's, we can't afford to live here, particularly if it's going to be taxed. I have 9 close peers, roughly my same rank, either retired or retiring. And of those 9 folks, I can't name one who plans on staying in the state of Vermont. Most of these are native Vermonters who have served their country and have also worked in the civilian marketplace. My intent is to be a teacher again. Obviously, if I can't afford to be in this state, I will go teach somewhere else. I still hold the Vermont teacher certificate, I believe. If not, it should be easy to get it back. And I'm just frustrated that we are, out of all of the states in the union, there are only 3 in the District of Columbia that do not even get a partial break on our taxes for our military retirement. I understand there may be a housing market issue here, bringing soldiers or retired soldiers in, but you're losing an awful lot of soldiers from the state once our retirement age hits. And we can all get back to the workforce. I'm a little bit different. I'm a little bit older, but most of those folks that I mentioned are employed in other states at this point, or are planning on seeking employment in other states that are more sympathetic to the retired military people. That's all I have. Pending questions.
Okay, any questions from the committee? I am not seeing any, so thank you. That's helpful. All
Okay.
right, we are going on to Kim Steiner.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Kim Steiner, and I'm retired out of the Vermont Army National Guard. My husband and I are both military retirees, and I am speaking to you from New Hampshire because we did leave Vermont in September. We're both in our 60s. We're both retired, and we just couldn't afford it anymore. We had a beautiful home we loved. We had a large bit of property in Williamstown, and it would have been wonderful. When we are at a point in our lives where we have expendable income, we can go out and shop and eat, go to eateries and just spend our money to help support the local economies. But we couldn't keep doing it knowing that all we had to do was cross the river and we'd have more of that to spend. We didn't leave because of environment. We actually moved to, if I look out the window here, the exact same environment we were living in. And we didn't want to go far because our children and grandchildren are still in Vermont. So we wanted to be close enough that we can still see them and they can see us easily. One of the things that I have not heard brought up that I think is important too is for most military retirees, we are not much of a burden on any of the state programs. We have our own healthcare plans. We retire with one, so we can take care of ourselves. Many of the military retirees also have great job skills. They have amazing work ethic, and they're leaving. We left and we would have stayed. We just couldn't do it financially.
You live up on Tower Road?
You know me. Yes, I lived up
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
actually, I lived on Grandview.
Oh.
Yes,
okay.
with the terrific apple tree out front. Yep.
Yep, and the big log home.
Okay. I won't ask if you're related to Philomena, but you are. Okay. Any questions for Kim? Okay, thank you very much. And we're going on to Jim Madzona, who is.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair,
Good
and
afternoon.
thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear, there you are. I
Oh,
can hear
there I
you. I
am. You're
can't
looking for
find
me.
you on my screen.
Most people don't want to see me there, Madam Chair, but I'll just be heard, and that will be well enough. But good afternoon, and thanks for your willingness to hear from me today. I wear a couple hats today. I'm retired from the U.S. Coast Guard, 24 and a half years. Was fortunate enough to retire as a captain and retire to Vermont, but I'm also a small business owner. So I want to weave in some of what you heard from Senator Brock and my fellow service mates here as to some of the things I think you guys would be important for you to hear in your deliberations. I can't resist the joke, but while S53 starts out as a feminine product bill, I'm certainly pleased to speak to you to the military retirement pay. But I would say, as a small business owner of a business that sits on the Connecticut River, where you can really throw a rock to New Hampshire, I'm certainly supportive of that portion of the bill as well, because I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think it's really important that when we look at these things, we look at them in the totality of the impacts, not just one thing, one income stream, but all the factors that go in there, and some of which you can't measure, quite frankly, as hard as you try. But again, thanks for letting me be here. I also wanted to thank, I think, if I'm correct, Senator Brock and McDonald for their service to our country. Back in the day, I'm sure. So thank you. As I understand from listening to your 216 meeting online, which is great that these things are accessible. So believe it or not, I spent a couple hours listening to you all, or some of you anyway. There's about 3,900 retirees in the state. Of which 3,000 are enlisted and about 1,000 officers. Well, this bill that we have before you speaks of an exemption of $10,000 of income, and which is wonderful recognition of our service members. I would hope that that we can look a little bit more broadly and take the lead from some of our other fellow states in the union to exempt the entire military retiree income. I'd also encourage and the inclusion of exempting any spousal support should the service member pass away. For those that are familiar with the service, the one thing, at least I'm a little bit older, so I would say this was definitely true during my time. We tended not to value the families in their service to our country, but I can tell you that that is equally as important as the member. So to have your thinking reflect exempting the tax for any surviving spouses, excuse me, would be thinking of the service members' commitment to our country. I am told that only 1% of Americans serve our country. So I would hope that despite all of our collective political views around the table as we talk today, that we can all stand and support and appreciate those who have defended our country and protect our freedoms. Well, I think the backdrop, as I said earlier, of looking at many different aspects of this, the backdrop of what retirees bring, a full a full nother career basically of service, of highly skilled people, as both the Colonel and Kim mentioned, to us, our state, as productive members is a valuable tool that you can't grow these people on trees. And when I say that, what I'm saying is that as business owners and people in business, and I do have some experience with this, and some of you may be business owners, typically when you hire somebody who has had some military service, you have a hard worker, a dedicated employee, somebody who's loyal and committed. I challenge you to find these things ubiquitously across our culture today. So I guess some of this is easy for me to say, right? It's easy for me to say, hey, let's, the $10,000, I guess is $1 million. If I listened to your meeting the other day, I like what the commissioner put forward, the 3.25 million number in support of the entire exemption. Certainly was great to hear that the 26%, I guess, of Vermont retirees would have a full exemption, I guess, even at the $10,000 level, which is wonderful and a great step. But as I said, I listened to your meeting and I wanted to I think Ram did a good job of this, but I wanted to just touch back on a couple terms and that you guys threw around the other day. Of course, like veteran, retiree, these kinds of things. And I wanted to also talk about disabled veterans as well in the context of this. Sorry for the paper. Obviously a veteran, anybody, I think you guys have this, anybody who served at all in any capacity, a retiree is somebody who has completed successfully 20 years and then therefore is entitled to a military pension. On the disabled veterans, I wanted to talk about this because I think there was some confusion maybe or some discussion anyway, I should say. These folks, regardless of their years of service, became disabled through their service and are get paid some kind of stipend each month from the Veterans Administration. And it is this group of people who typically are exempt from income taxes anyway through the VA. And then they also receive usually, and then this is based on the towns, some exemption from property taxes. But that's unique, I think, I think it flows by town, if I have that correct. And I just bring that up because
it's statewide, and it was what Vermont did as a tax reduction to veterans. Apparently, property taxes were more of an issue in 1948 than income tax in Vermont. So that is what we did.
Right. But of course, that's not universal either, but that's another subject. But I just wanted to, just for clarification, as you deliberate, it's not any military retiree is not garnering any further tax exemption. So I think that's a distinction I wanted to make. So yeah, I just wanted to, and I've submitted this in writing if you want to review it later, but I just wanted to appeal to your collective patriotism, I guess, in supporting our military community. I think these people, myself included, contribute highly to the state when they return, if they can afford to. You just heard two people, one who left and one is leaving. I mean, that hurts my heart, to be honest with you. But I understand their dilemma. I would say in my own case, I was able to get a pretty good job. We had two young kids when we moved here, and I'll be honest with you. I have a great military retirement. I retired at a pretty high level, but I would say that's not a retirement. Not at 45 years old. That was not enough to support my family. So I had to work, but I think that's the part of it that we need to understand. These people are going to contribute for 20. Maybe 30 years, whatever. I'm 60, maybe, isn't 60 the new 40? Anyway, I'm going with that. So, yep. So why did I choose to retire to Vermont? I mean, I think you talked about this the other day. What's keeping people here? What's making people leave? So even though it's not my home state of birth, it's been my home of record since the early 80s when I went into the military. It was a place that I found, and we decided to make it home someday. We were never sure that we would, but we did. So fast forward 2008, retired from the service, decided to return home get a job and continue to contribute to the workforce. So I think these are the kind of people that we could attract, but it's got to add up. I would say that one of the things that, and I've said it before, but I want you to really hear this, is that when people retire, they're looking at these things actively. In fact, there's a class that's given to all retirees. It's called TAP, Transition Assistance Planning, or something to that. Something like that. Anyway, basically, in addition to all the other things, health benefits, whatever, one of the things is basically a listing of the state's taxes and structure in terms of its friendliness toward military retirees. So people make active choices there. I think we heard earlier, whatever, 20,000 people are retiring. I think Vermont can do better at getting people to retire here. And one of the other sort of circling factors on that is COVID-19, right? People are working remotely. We're blessed to have this meeting remotely, aren't we? Thank you. 2.5-hour drive to Montpelier, crappy parking, and stuffy conference rooms. So this is really works out well. But you know, the whole point of broadband and increased cellular will increase employment in our state and to make it more attractive to families. I mean, all these things contribute. You know that. You've heard that. In addition to retiring to Vermont, one of the things that I found most attractive as a flatlander and even as a resident for a long time was the charm of Vermont that it has that's unique among the 50 states in some respects, in terms of its small communities and small businesses and towns and, you know, just quaint little places, if you want to call it that. So there was a 100-year-old country store in the neck of the woods I live in the Northeast Kingdom, in the part of the state everyone forgets, that had been there, like I said, for 100 years, been shuttered for 5 years. So decided that part of my retirement energy was to get that revived again. And so there's a lot of challenges with that. The workforce challenges that you heard earlier are so true. We can't get anybody to work for us, regardless of what we're doing with minimum wage and all that kind of stuff. People that are working for us don't need to work. And that's not a good position to be in as a small business owner. So I feel like when we look at these things and when we think about these things, we have the opportunity to proact. The results may not come to a number on a spreadsheet, but they will come to us at some point. You know, while I'm disheartened that we're talking about, as Senator Brock said, I hate to think that we're honoring our military retirees when we're the 47th state who hasn't done it, or, you know, to the game, and that it's part of a bigger conversation. But, you know, it's good that we're having the conversation, right? And that you can consider that, and you can look at this more broadly, that yes, it's going to cost maybe the state a little bit of money, but there's going to be some impacts that and some value to that maybe the move to stay or play to whatever the $10,000 thing, maybe not, or this would augment the achievements maybe in those areas to get people here who have skills. So I think I've talked way too much, but I wanted to thank you for taking my testimony, and also for your service to the state of Vermont, and just want to encourage the 10,000. I wish we could get to the entire military pension, including spousal support for surviving spouses, and just recognizing the great things that the retirees deliver to the community and in terms of their family. And I mean, I'm not saying everybody's in the position, but we opened a business that was generating no revenue, no taxes for the state of Vermont for 5 years, and probably would still be shut today. So we're trying, and maybe altruistic and dumb from a business perspective, but we're trying to make Vermont what the things that I remember from the 80s that stand out to me and that I want to preserve. So we're trying to do that in a way that sustains our community. So with that, I'll take questions if there's time.
Okay, do we have any questions? Senator McDonald, it looks painful. You're muted.
I want to thank the witness for bringing up the property tax exemption that has been in place for decades, and also add that that there was a more recent property tax exemption which is voted throughout the state by local towns, where they put it on the ballot and you can exempt 10, 20, 30, $40,000 from the value of the property that you are taxed. And the reason I bring that up was, Madam Chair, your leadership about a dozen years ago, 10 years ago, when we learned that exemption off your property tax produced almost $0 to benefits who were injured, because most of those injured veterans had incomes that made them eligible to pay their taxes based on their income. And when we did our investigation on this committee, we found out that the benefits for reducing the appraised value didn't amount to real dollars. And for each of those people today who has a disability, those benefits are calculated individually, person by person by person, so that on their income tax, those veterans get the dollar amount that the exemption would have produced, but didn't produce. And it was Senator Cummings who was the chair when we convinced the tax department to do that. And it took that on paper exemption for veterans and made it a real in the pocket change. It was so I won't go on at length, but this committee is not insensitive to veterans issues.
No, we are not. Okay. Any other questions? I am not seeing any. Senator Brock, wrap up.
I'd like to thank all of the folks who testified here today. And we tried to provide a broad and balanced view with both the administration as well as some actual live stories of what this means to people. We could have added more. It would be great to have some active duty people from outside of the Guard, but of course, obviously that's very difficult to do. But you have a broad picture now, and I hope you'll take a look at the materials that are attached to the website. I should credit Ben Donsbach and Matt Eldridge, who are interns, they're juniors at UVM, who are helping me during this session to do research on issues. And I think they did a great job in digging into this subject, and hope that we will congratulate them for the work that they did on this as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please thank them. And Senator Bray, you have a question.
Just an observation to share. So thanks, Senator Brock, and thanks to all our witnesses for bringing more information into the committee. I think, if it seems puzzling to anyone visiting with us today, why it's even sort of a discussion, I know there's a shared sense of honoring those who have served, and there's 5 generations of military in my family. There's a lot of interest and sympathy. I think one of the challenges for the committee is always, as we look at Vermonters across the board and what their retirement situations are, that we're trying always to balance the needs of any particular group and their treatment compared to many Vermonters who are in less secure positions when it comes to retirement. And so it's a challenging balancing act. And so anyway, I wanted to just thank people for coming and explain a little bit, at least for myself, why it is that it's not sort of a slam dunk, the way that some people might imagine it to be.
Right. Okay. Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was trying to find out how much this meant on an individual basis for a retiree, and based on the JFO analysis, it's about $730 per person. Is that correct, Graham? That's what I read. Yeah, I see you nodding. So, and that's with the full exemption. And I'm just, I know for some, I don't want to discredit that amount of money. That's real money. That's real money to me. That's real money to most Vermonters. That's significant in many ways, but is it significant enough to have you move out of state like that? I just, we're paying people to move here, and we're paying them a lot more in that remote worker program than $730. So it just doesn't seem to me like, it seems to me that there's a sort of collection of a bunch of things. Maybe one of them, looking at the map, it doesn't look like we have any, we don't have a smaller percentage of veteran of military retirees in a shocking way, even though we're one of the only states. We have more than a lot of states that have military retiree exemptions. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, how much does this matter? In fact, if all we're trying to do is honor veterans, then it might be worth honoring veterans for $730 each. But what I'm hearing, the primary argument here is an economic development one, and that's less convincing to me than the argument that we should honor veterans. So I'm just, that doesn't seem like, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. It's
Okay.
It's not a lot of money, and so it doesn't seem like the impact. And it's for people who have higher incomes. The average income for people with military pensions is actually quite higher than the average Vermonter. So,
Oh, I think it's over 80% of Vermonters don't have any retirement savings.
no, I'm talking about the income. When you're looking at the income, their income plus pension, they're higher income than most Vermonters. And
We're
so
gonna hash all of this out, because this is not the only request that we have. So I think I'd like to thank all the witnesses who came today. Again, it's not that we don't honor your service. We did do the reduction in property tax back in the 40s when most of these pension reductions went in. And so, it's not that we haven't tried to honor veterans. I think we listened to the veterans at that time about what they would like. And that's actually, most veterans do better under Act 60 with the income sensitivity than they did with that house value reduction. But unless you really do produce the economic development in the short time, because all the money, the one-time money, I'm told, is gone, we are going to have to raise somebody else's taxes or cut somebody else's services. And I think that's the balance we continually try to make. We're a small state, and we just don't have a lot of elasticity in there. So we're going to keep working on this. We have several requests to look at retirement benefits, and we do exempt a certain level of Social Security. So veterans that worked and paid Social Security, and I understand there's a mix out there, are given that reduction. So thank you all. Committee, we are scheduled to take a break until 3:15, so you can get up and stretch your legs. And then we're going to come back and do municipal retention of property tax and value on timeshare projects. So enjoy a couple minutes, and I'll see you at 3.